say literally the word something. Todd, say something.
Something? No,
Yes.
Did I get my cue right on that?
I just wanted to make sure you were able to say something. Julie,
I thought it was going to be PowerShell. I really did. I would have put money on it.
All right, everybody. Welcome to February 4th, 2026. New document library UX is on the table. Let's get started. The gang is all here, even Todd. And not that we're going to let him say anything, but he's here. And we're going to talk about the document library UX. We're going to do an overview of what's new. We will discuss the customer sentiment around this update. That's a very lovely way to say how people feel about it. We'll talk about inconsistencies across OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and lists. I will mention some customization issues. We'll sort of try to talk about how you might manage through this change, and certainly share what you think in the chat, because we would be happy to share your additional customer sentiment with Microsoft. With glee, I would share that with them. All right, Mark Cashman, start us off.
All right, so this is a visual that's going to get broken down by the entire team, but if you didn't know about the changes, this is the visual summary. A lot changed. I'm going to start with one that I thought was just the most jarring, where it's the most obvious that, did I get this update? The answer should be obvious. When you see the update, you'll know you got it. But did you know it was coming? What changed? How do I do this based on how I used to do that? So we're going to break down the major bucket areas. But if you kind of stare around this slide, and of course, there's always reading to go do to learn of the communication that went out, or maybe as you find out through the talk today, the lack of communication to some degree. A lot changed, a significant amount. And in any UX changes, raise your hand or make noise in some fashion if you remember when the search box went from one side to the other, and the havoc that it wreaked in the past, just because people were looking for it. And the big question that came through back to Microsoft was, where's the search button? You took search away. How could you? So there's going to be a lot of that in the adoption world. And of course, if you do any sense of documentation, grab these images. They're royalty free, and you can use them to update all of your documentation in the wonderful world of extra hours you're going to find to do all of that. But the short version here is a lot changed, and we're going to go through it all. But not just little buttons, colors changed, menus moved, what's in the drop-down changed, what is the filtering mechanisms, where are the views, all of that changed. So this is the changed happened, and let's walk through it. So next slide, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the one that I noticed first just as an individual, but also thought was going to be really challenging, because not only did it move, but it's now the same or different in lots of places. So this is the new menu. When you're in the document library and you click the new drop-down button, some people still have it. A lot of people now have the new, what you see on the right side, which is called create and upload, which mentally is hard because it doesn't map one-to-one. When you do find it from the left to the right, it obviously has a lot of new things in it. Some of them are obviously explained. It's the same list plus some of the new capabilities of SharePoint. But it also sort of starts to blend what used to be the new and the upload is to now just everything in one menu. So the upload mechanism, creating new folders, creating new documents. But to me, it's the left to right that significantly changed. And the last thing that really isn't on this slide is if you're in OneDrive, if you're in a document library, if you're on a list, if you're here, if you're there, especially when you're in Teams, it isn't yet all updated or the same, even if that is a stated goal. It's different. It's really confusing. If you do find it and get used to it, of course, you'll get used to it in some fashion. But I think a big thing, especially if you're here on behalf of others, is it moved, the name changed, and what's under it's very, very different. I'm going to pause here before we hand over and just let Todd say literally the word something. Todd, say something.
Something? No,
Yes.
Did I get my cue right on that?
I just wanted to make sure you were able to say something. Julie,
I thought it was going to be
you gotta let him
PowerShell. I
talk.
really did. I would have put money on it.
Well, I don't know. So as I was going through the deck for this, I don't know that there's any PowerShell changes for me to try to wedge in. I think everything still gets created the same way and modified the same way. So
I bet if you created a script that made it so that it undid all of the changes back to the original UX, people would love you.
That's what it would take for people to love me. Aww.
Yeah, we saw some chat that you can add some JSON to make things behave differently. So there you go.
There we go. I'll get on that this afternoon.
Right, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've kickstarted the rest of the team. Carrie is next to go through the next whiplash element. That was my contribution of it really did feel like whiplash, this change. This was a big one.
Yeah, I just want to re-mention that new folder thing. I think it was even confusing to us who used the old one because that folder upload under the upload button on the left bottom had the folder as an option to upload. So even when you changed the settings on the library to disable folders, creating new folders, that upload folder was there, but it was hidden. So most of us didn't actually even recognize that it was there. This change also makes that folder thing so much more prominent. And I think that's a disservice for when we are trying to keep users from using folders for nesting and security. It's unfortunate change because something as a person who customizes listen libraries a lot by adding SharePoint framework solutions for command sets or field customizers or even app customizers to the page, that disabling folder is really something we wanted to keep intact. And so even though it was an upload before, it just feels like the prominence changing is a real disservice to the user, although they could argue that it is the same. All right, let's move on to the next part. Carrie, managing views. This one is really tricky in my opinion.
Yeah, so another change that was made to the document library UX is how you select and also edit and manage the views. And so before the changes, if you wanted to select a view or make changes to it, you would do so by expanding that views drop-down menu on the upper right. And so that's depicted here in that before shot. So this is like where all the options were sort of contained in one place, so to speak, right? They weren't in all different places. With the recent changes, though, they've split all those options out into a couple of different places. And I'm assuming that's just to put it kind of contextually where you might expect them to be. But for me, so far, it's been a little bit confusing. I have to really think about where those places are. So in the first image, in the after section, you'll see that the views are now visible as little pill buttons below, like the breadcrumb above the library. And they're starting at the left. So you're used to kind of seeing views at the right, and now they're starting kind of from left to right. And while this lets you sort of quickly jump between those pills to go from view to view, if you have more than a few of those views, so more than 2 or 3, you still need to click the little double arrow icon to see the list of the views displayed in that sort of drop down. So in testing this out, I was only able to create I think 2 views that were visible there with the all documents and the standard ones that they give you before they hit that drop down level, which looks very similar to the way it did before, where you just go and you get all the rest of your views. So that was a little bit interesting to see because you can really only add 1 or 2 before it gets set behind that little arrow. They are displayed alphabetically like they were before, but there isn't any real drag and drop option here either to reorder those. So again, if it's trying to put the views most commonly used at the front and more visible, it kind of depends on what they're called, right? Because they still could be behind those still arrows. And this is also where you can add a new view. So in that last little pill there is where you would create your new views for your library. And there's some other filter options that I think Patrick's going to talk about in a minute. The other area where you can access view options is the pills themselves. So like if you click on the pill, this is that middle image, and you get the little drop down, this is where you can save it, rename it, delete it, and I believe you set the default here as well. So, going to the pill itself, dropping down, you're getting those type of options. And then the last place is the little options icon, which looks like the web properties icon, I guess, if on a SharePoint page, but that's where you can get all of the sort of more editing and customizing options for the library. So if you want to change how documents are displayed, maybe see them as tiles, you can sort and group here, which sort of came up a level, right, from the edit section. It lets you do that here as well. And then also, if you edit and customize the view, you could do some conditional formatting and stuff from here also. So, you know, I guess the takeaway is having it as a sort of a big drop down on the right with sort of everything. Now you've got to kind of think it has to do with views, but what does it have to do with views and where do I go to do that? So for me, it's just kind of a little bit of overload of remembering where to go, where I had them all in one spot before.
The one that I thought was totally missing was edit view. You know, you click on the view name, you see some things you can do, but you can't edit the view. And I just thought that was gone, meaning I would have to go into list or library settings and go into the views there. There still are things that you can't add to views in the UI, so you have to go to edit view to do it. So I thought that was gone until we realized that, and we all realized this together as we were talking, that properties thing, those two sliders actually gave us a bunch of extra options that we didn't even realize were there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And the sort, the sort in the group, I mean, it's nice that it's at that level, but one could argue you could do that with the column headers also, right? It doesn't really need to, it doesn't even need to be there, but I don't know.
Derek, did you have anything to add?
No, I was going to mention what Mark had mentioned about the edit view. Just like literally, I was fuming because I thought they had taken it away. They didn't actually take it away. They just took it out of a logical place, right? Like there really shouldn't be two places to do the same set of work. And if you look at the pictures, like why do we need two places to save as or save a view? Like all the editing things related to a view should be in one spot, in my personal opinion. But
I get the sense
that is my soapbox that I will die on.
I get the sense that they think that, and there are different audiences here for these changes, I think, but I think they get the sense that most users would create views by dragging and dropping the columns and doing filtering and stuff, and then saving that as a view. I don't see people doing it that way necessarily. If you've used SharePoint for more than a few years, you're just used to going to that edit view because you can select columns you can't pick in the UI. You can sort and filter and group in ways that you can't through the UI. So until there's parity there, that edit view button is really important.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yep.
Okay, well yeah, I agree with everything there. There's a lot of chatter in that I can't even summarize this quickly in the chat, so we'll leave it there for now and move on because we have a lot to cover. So Mark, why don't we talk about the toolbar next, because this one's super confusing too.
Yeah. So we've been used to having pretty much all of our options on a library in a single toolbar that goes across the top and stays there all the time. It changes based on the context. If you've selected one item, if you've selected two items, the buttons change, but it's always been right there and we knew where to scan there. Now that top section is it's simplified way down, though it has some extra buttons that I would question the utility of. So for example, the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and PDF buttons are actually filters, and Patrick will talk some more about those, that help you filter down your view. But the rest of the stuff is, I guess, the things that they wanted to promote that people could be doing the most often. So it's a simplified top area, but it's also on multiple levels. So you sort of have to figure out which level am I operating in. Create and upload is above that little properties thing, for example. Views have switched to the left. Create and upload is switched to the right instead of new on the left. So you can see that some things have moved back and forth. Additionally, some of the things that were typically always there, and everybody's screen size is different. So, where does the ellipsis break is something that might be different for each of us based on how much we've paid for our expensive screens. More of that stuff is in the drop down in the ellipsis. And so you sort of have to poke around a little bit. If you had muscle memory about, this thing that I like to use was always right here. Well, it's not always right here anymore. Now it's in a different place and in a different order. If you go to the, I know that you want to talk about this a little bit, Julie, but if you go to the next slide, if you've selected a file in your library, then the toolbar comes back. So if you flip back, you see that the unselected view is the one that shows the Word, Excel, and PowerPoint icons. If you've selected an item, then you see a somewhat similar toolbar to what we're used to, except everything's in a different place. So if you sort of go from left to right, you're going to see that they're not in the same order. Again, I would assume that this is based on some sort of research about, what are the most common things that people are clicking on. I think that copy to and move to are reversed. So that for me is just like, got to make sure I click on the right one. So it's familiar, but in a different order, and some of the icons are different. Some of the, what's in behind the ellipsis by default is different. So, and I know, Julie, you want to talk a little bit about extensibility here.
Yeah, and Dan Toft, who's on the call, is the originator, the one who sort of found and reported to Microsoft about what was going on here, also reported it into the SP Dev Docs, which we have a link for in our references section. So if you are someone who's extending the platform and you are seeing anything like this, please go interact with Dan's post in the GitHub on the SP Dev Docs. That your interaction with it, either saying, me too as a comment, or thumbs upping, or doing any kind of interactivity issue, helps raise awareness to Microsoft, giving them metrics that allow them to understand how big of a problem this is. And in my opinion, this one's a pretty huge problem. So if you're not familiar with the extensibility of the list and library experience, one of the things we can do with the SharePoint framework is do what's called a command set extension, which allows us to put an item in this menu that you're seeing the before screen there. We were able to put our own menu items in that list, and they could respond in several ways. They could either just show up all the time, or they could show up based on whether you had one or multiple entries selected. So there was sort of 3 different ways an item in that command bar would show up, depending on whether you had something selected or not, and if you had multiple selected or only one. And essentially, in my opinion, if you're doing that, if you're taking the time to build that kind of extension, obviously it needs to be front and center. It's highly important to whatever library that is showing up on. And what essentially happened is that if I go back to this previous screen, every one of the extensions now only show up underneath the ... button. So you have to open that menu up to see the option that is the custom command set that you added to the list or library. So that's a huge problem. I have not tested, maybe Dan, if you have, you could come off mute and say more, but I have not tested a command set extension where it only supposed to show up when you select something or select multiple things. I don't know if it too would be always under the ... or if it would actually show up in the command menu here in an appropriate place like it used to. If you want to speak on that.
It shows up where it's supposed to when you have the selection thing, because the selected row is way longer and kind of resembles what we had before. So there's more space there.
Okay, great to know. Great to know. But to just hammer this point home, these extensibility things are the things that sort of are always falling off the end of Microsoft's radar from the product team perspective. It's something that makes me very, very angry. If you follow the Code Deploy Go Live podcast, you know that Andrew Connell and I get up in arms about this kind of stuff all the time. It is very, very important that if you're doing this kind of extensibility, you interact with Dan's post, because that's going to be the only way that we can get the engineering teams and the SharePoint team to understand the importance of it. Okay, that's the end of my soapbox. Let's move on to filters. Patrick, go ahead. Take us home. Not literally, we have more slides.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously we all use filters and our lists and libraries, and in libraries it's no different. There are some changes that have been made. Certainly, you now have a specific one filter for chronological, where you can sort your items chronologically. Imagine that. But the one that I think kind of threw me the most was, as Mark was saying, the addition of these little mini pills for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and PDF. My first assumption looking at this was that's how I create a document. If I want to create a new Word document, I'm going to click on the Word icon here. That's not. That is actually just to filter by those documents. So if you click on any of them, you actually pops up the filter screen on the right there, which you will notice is not alphabetical under type. It's actually using some of the old logos, imagine that. So like PowerPoint is the old logo. PDF is the old logo. All sorts of fun stuff. So the first thing is that is actually filters. You can filter by document type, which I can't say I've ever used, but maybe there are people out there who do that. It feels a little too front and center to me, and frankly, is more confusing because I would think that is for creating a document. I do appreciate the filters by the right a little bit, because you can still do modified by there, and you can select by type. Or we have this fun little slide bar now that you can do by date. The good news, which I think we'll all appreciate, is that you can actually still filter by clicking on your column head. So if you go to the modified column, you can click that and select your modified date. You can also do that with the modified by, although modified by pops up this little filter screen as well. So there is a slight change in the UI there as well, but you can still filter by selecting the column.
Awesome.
And those file type icons don't go away if you don't have any of them, right? So say I have a library that's got none of those file types in it, they're still sitting there, right?
Well, and you notice the type too, is there's a lot of you that you can sort by, you can filter by an agent now. Yeah. You can filter by a PNG, but not a JPEG. So there's definitely some wonkiness there.
Yeah, but the Word, Excel, PowerPoint icons have nothing to do with the contents of your library, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
There's one other thing here too, just to mention that when you do filter and sort, it does give you a little like visual pop-up indicator that you've filtered and sorted something. So in other words, it says like unsaved changes or whatever, where at least you know if you need to then save that for someone else to see. It kind of gives you a little bit of a trigger, which, I guess is helpful.
One could say. All right. Oh, my button wasn't working. All right. Inconsistencies. Derek.
All right. So as you can imagine, this change has not rolled out everywhere and anywhere. So while it is, I looked at this specifically at one very specific list, and depending on, or library, and depending on which library I was in, I got a completely different user experience. And so the image on the left-hand side, that's SharePoint. That's the new user experience that we've been looking at all these examples of. On the right-hand side, I'd synchronized this to my OneDrive. And so I'm looking at it inside the lens of my OneDrive. Now it's the same whether you're looking at it in OneDrive in Teams or OneDrive on the web. Again, the create and upload button has now moved because it's on the left in OneDrive, it's on the right in SharePoint, which is kind of a challenge from a user experience perspective. If you're doing it inside of Teams, that hasn't been updated. Well, pieces of it have updated because like the pills for the views have moved, but the toolbars are all still the old UI. So it's really, really confusing, especially if you're trying to train your users, if they're navigating between Teams and SharePoint, if they've got different use cases where they're trying to use both tools. It really increases the cognitive load on the user trying to decode what should I do, how do I do it, especially if it's something that they don't necessarily do every single day. They're gonna forget.
This is real tough. And the whole blog saying, you know, we're changing it to create and upload to better align with OneDrive. I'm like, it's still on the opposite side, which is worth the button saying the same thing is just like not as critical as it being in the same friggin' place.
moving a key UX element, like a key thing that users need to do from the top left to the top right, I don't know. I would assume they have some kind of user experience research that they did.
Yeah, there was SharePoint 2007 to 2010 to 2013, where they moved it back and forth and back and forth, and whichever one people yelled about the most is where they left.
Yeah, but this is like, you know, if you look at the Nielsen Norman research, it really says the top level things that you need to like highlight, top left, right? Like that's where it belongs. That's the high profile spot. All right, so this is just how you interact with a document library in 3 different tools. If you go to the next slide, I wanted to highlight that it really, really brings into inconsistencies the greater inconsistencies between lists and libraries. And for those of us that have been doing this work for a really long time, we know it's under the hood. We've got site columns and content types, and it's all more or less the same under the hood, but it makes it really hard for users to switch between using different things because the modality is changing and how they interact with views and add new things. It's changing again. And there's not really, you know, I would wish to say that maybe everything will come in together, but it's not. Like these are 2 separate products at this point is what it feels like.
Well, worse, they do the same friggin' thing. Just because one is file-centric and one isn't.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean that they're essentially not the same damn thing. And to have this, users have to do so much work to understand how to use the thing that essentially should be working exactly the same way is just so mind-blowing. It's just so mind-blowing.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
With 3 minutes left, these are some great ones. Mark Cashman, did you want to summarize, say something?
Yeah.
You know.
I think the top level summary is you're not alone. Obviously, on this call, the whole point was to raise awareness and up level and get feedback and help everybody through it. So sharing your thoughts are important. Liking that post to make sure that the change, not just the negative downside of it, but just your preferences, whatever they might be, are heard. And these weren't hard to find. And I'm just going to go and read the one at the bottom verbatim. As you work through it, you'll see that a lot of the focus that people saw that they didn't like was it was such on the visual aspect and not on the usability. Like if you change it and it becomes easier to use, great, go for it. But the bottom one is this is probably the biggest example of change for change's sake I've seen in a while, and I haven't yet been able to make a case for anything good in it. Certainly a strong sentiment for why did you do this? If there's a reason, then you can reason through it. If there's no reason, it's unreasonable. So these were not hard to find. Certainly if you haven't shared your voice, we think it's important whether you like it or don't like it. And specifically the things that you do or don't like, be specific and you know, put it in places where not only can you get visibility of other people liking it, but where Microsoft might see it. I think it's important. There's the feedback portal. That's why we put the link there. And still one of the areas of activity, of course, is the subreddit for SharePoint in Reddit. It's always a fun place to share ideas, get feedback, and share what's on top of mind. So you're Verbatim, and I thought we saw one that was sort of heartbreaking for me from Francis earlier in the thread. All the work that they had done with the specific views in a SharePoint from a team app perspective got busted with this new UX update. And so they had to scramble and find a workaround quickly. That's what they shared in the chat. And imagine the scale of the world when that is what we found as one person on a 33-person call.
Yeah.
So not a small feature. The MAU is incredible on libraries and lists, and of course all of SharePoint, with 220 million plus people, and probably more since the last number. Anyway, lots of sentiment, important to have your voice heard.
Yeah, I agree. And we're going to be a little long, but I think it's important. Let's just quickly try to, I'll read through these if any Sympraxian wants to say something more, but how to manage through this change. It feels like, PTSD or something like that. Like I'm feeling very anxious and irritated, and you kind of almost want to walk away.
Pre-traumatic stress disorder?
Yeah. So create news to highlight the changes for your organization. Acknowledge that the change is there. Don't ignore it. Bring it up, highlight it, try to give them information. I mean, heck, share this YouTube video when we post it. Maybe it can help some people not feel so alone and ostracized that, that their disappointment with the change is shared. Meet with super users to help notify and train about the changes. Again, another way to just help with your communications in your organization to help people understand that the change is here because it came really fast. It's very awkward. And part of the chat conversation that we're having here is I have tenants that I haven't seen it in, and it can be commercial tenants or not commercial tenants. The GCC tenants, are not there. Some dev tenants that are in first release haven't even seen it yet. So that's so not obvious where the changes have landed and where they haven't. I ironically have no tenants that I have access to that don't have it, but I know Mark has access to a bunch that don't have it. So it's just really all over the place. So link to our Ask and Praxis, and then note any bugs and report. I can't nail this home or drive this home any more strongly that don't just be mad about this stuff. Report. Comment on the blog post, comment on Reddit, comment on the feedback portal, comment on GitHub issues. You have to make your voice heard. It is the only way that we can push Microsoft so that they understand when these things break are really unfortunate, that they understand that. Doesn't mean something's going to change, but it does mean that we get that feedback through. Sometimes it does mean things are going to change.
And sometimes it makes you feel better if you complain.
That too. We're complainers here. All right. Resources that you might need, that blog from Lincoln Damaris that talks about that. That's fun reading. Not going to lie, the comment section there, some fun reading. Dan's GitHub issue is that the second major post down. Emily Mancini wrote a great community reaction post elevating some of that Nielsen Norman stuff that Patrick also and Carrie specialize in, and that I'm seeing Derek start to parrot a lot lately. I wonder if that's because he lives with Patrick. All righty. That's all we've got today. We're going a little over, so let me wrap it up. February 18th is our next episode. SharePoint sites as a unit of work, the pros and cons. This is something we've been talking a lot with clients lately, and I felt like, hey, let's have this conversation out loud with our Ask and Praxis crew. So we're gonna do that next time. The Microsoft 365 Community Conference in Miami is in a couple of days, so we're going to be there. It's fallen off of this list, but coming up after that is the Microsoft 365 Community Conference in Orlando. A bunch of us will be there, and then the European Collaboration Summit. A bunch of us will be there in Cologne, Germany after that. So if you're going to be there, join us. We've got discount codes for both of those events, so sign up, and we will see you there. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. Take care, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask and Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.